Howdy, 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 my name is Anachi Sasuke, and welcome back to SCP Sidestep. So in this episode, we're going to be looking at the experiment log of all the various SCPs they've tried to kill the hard-to-kill lizard with. So, obviously, there's going to be a lot of these SCPs that I don't know what they are. It looks like they do it out of order, but so far I've seen the first few. But there are definitely going to be some where I don't know what the SCPs are, and for the sake of not, I guess, spoiling it for myself, that sounds dumb saying it to myself in a room by myself, but for the sake of not spoiling it, I might not see what they are. If I don't know what they are, I'll probably just go with it, because I don't know if you can see the scroll bar over here, but it's a fairly long page. So this entire SCP Sidestep episode is going to be just this, and if it turns out it moves quicker than I expected, well, it's still going to be just this. So, test log T98816 OC 108 dash, not dash, what the hell am I talking about? /682. Cross SCP termination testing for 682. Due to the highly aggressive, adaptive, and intelligent nature of 682, termination testing has been ordered with clearance from O5 Command. With major concerns raised about possible developed immunities due to the failure of 409, and possible adaptations, all tests must first be carried out on a tissue samples taken from 682. This step may be bypassed only by O5 command order. So first up is 689. It's exposed to 689. The light shuts off in the containment area, remains extinguished for 5 minutes. The lights are switched on. 689 is in its original position. 682 was in a pool of gray and black liquid with no observable life signs. Disposable dues issued to physically verify the termination with 2 agents supervising. The disposable dude enters 3 steps into the containment area when 682 rapidly rises and attacks them. Breaks containment and escapes, killing 1 agent in the process, the remaining agent killed by 689 due to accidental observation during testing. Notes: it appears that 682 is not alive in a way that is currently understood, or is immune to 689. In addition, it appears 682 has prior knowledge of 689, or was somehow able to understand its function in order to play possum and escape. Sample swallowed 17 without incident. 682 exposed to SCP-17 issues several sounds at extremely high volume, damaging several recording devices. Sound extends across several wavelengths, reported as the most god-awful roar by staff. 17 appears to stumble, then return to a far corner of the containment area. 682 attempts to break containment of both 682 and 17. It's suppressed by agents and removed. It states, "You foul bags of tissue, you don't get expunged." It is unclear if 682 somehow damaged 17 or communicated with it. Analysis of the recorded sound is ongoing. 162. Sample entangled without incident. Exposed to 162, begins thrashing violently, emitting several roaring sounds and issuing profanity directed at testing staff. Becomes entangled with 162, primarily in the lower body, head, and left forelimb. Entangled areas undergo massive trauma due to the thrashing. After 4 minutes of continued exposure, lunges away from 162, severing its lower jaw and left hind limb, and causing serious tissue damage to many areas of its body. 162 remains attached to the left forelimb of 682. It breaks containment using 162 against several agents, staff, and researchers, resulting in 11 deaths and 86 injuries. The forelimb and 162 removed from 682 during re-establishment of containment. 2 additional deaths occurred during the recontainment of 162. Note: General Blank has requested that Mr. Noaquium, if I said that right, and the members of staff involved with the approval of this test report to Site Command for a disciplinary hearing. SCP-61. Tissue test overwritten by O5 Command. Oh, okay, that's what it's saying. The tissue, the samples. 682 exposed to 61. Enters the relaxed state consistent with 61 exposure. Given the command lie down. Remains unresponsive. Command repeated twice before lowers itself to the ground. It was noted to be very sluggish and jerky. 682 given the command roll onto your back. Unresponsive. Command repeated 3 times. Shudders several times, partially rolling over before returning to former position. Command repeated 6 times. Appears to undergo a violent seizure, partially rising before collapsing to the floor. Given the command stand up. Rapidly rises and breaches containment. 682 ignores all commands given to it. Several agents and staff respond to re-establish containment. 682 emits a high-pitched screech. All human beings in a 15-meter radius suddenly enter the relaxed state consistent with 61 exposure. It consumes several members of staff before being recontained by specially equipped emergency response teams. Sonic Stun adaptation lost from 682 after 2 weeks. Study into how 682 integrated 61 into its biology is ongoing. SCP-53. Tissue test record overwritten by 05. 682, introduced to 53 containment area, appears to be very confused and shows no sign of being affected by 53. It appears to be afraid of 682 and hides behind a chair in her containment area. Okay. Okay, so 53 is a she. 682 lowers itself to the ground, resting its head on the floor. 53 approaches 682 and after several seconds of hesitation, briefly touches 682 before rapidly returning to her hiding place. Doesn't react in any way. 53 approaches 682. I'm just going to say him from now on. She approaches him and it says it's, but I'm going to say him anyway. Pats his head, causing him to exhale through his forward nostrils. She claps and hops in place several times before embracing the head of 682. For the remainder of the testing period, he appears to be in a very docile state with only 2 low-level escape attempts being made. 53 is observed to bring toys and other items to him and make several drawings on its forward carapace with crayons. Staff entering at the end of the test phase are immediately attacked by 682, resulting in 2 deaths and 5 injuries. He is contained and moved to a separate containment unit. 53 observed crying for several minutes after removed. Notes. The reaction of 682 is notable for several reasons. First, it is one of the few incidents where 682 has come into contact with biological tissue and not entered a rage state. Second, it has raised questions as to the physical makeup and composition of 53 in regards to the lack of response of 682. Third, it has provided a possible solution to long-term containment. However, approval for the mutual containment of 2 highly dangerous SCP items in a single containment unit is not likely. 123. Tissue sample absorbed by the core. The test was cancelled after a review of testing done between 162 and 682. The potential issues arising from 682 gaining control of 123 are too great at this time. Review of this proposal will be made if 682 is totally incapacitated by some means with no potential of escape or sudden adaptation. 173. 682 introduced into the containment area of 173, makes several screeching noises and quickly presses against the wall farthest from 173, staring at it the entire time. 682 continues to stare at 173 without pause for 6 hours. Agents equipped with large caliber sniper rifles dispatch and shoot out the eyes of 682 at the same time stopping all observation of 173 and 682. After resuming observation, 682 is shown to be on the floor with several injuries around its head, neck, and legs. 173 is seen to have tissue from 682 on its hands. Rapidly regenerates damage and moves to a different wall, developing several sets of eyes on various parts of its body, many covered by thick, clear caps of armored carapace. 682 maintains observation of 173 for an additional 12 hours, despite additional efforts of agents and Foundation staff. Allowed to exit containment area and recaptured in temporary containment. Notes. After review, it appears 173 was unable to do lethal damage to 682 due to a major difference of physical size. A possible repeat of this test may be made if 682 is damaged enough to reduce its physical mass to a level equal with 173. Item, Dr. Clef. Tissue test record, NA. Termination test record. 682 introduced the testing area. Dr. Clef introduced the testing area. Dr. Clef and 682 stare at each other for approximately 3 minutes. Dr. Clef slowly backs out of the testing area as 682 continues to stare. Attempts to open the door of the testing area, determined to be locked. Dr. Clef reportedly used several loud expletives and then attaches an unknown device to the door, keeping his eyes on 682 the whole time. 682 continues to stare. Dr. Clef detonates a small plastic explosive charge on the door, causing a containment breach. 682 continues to stare. Dr. Clef engages emergency secondary lockdown doors and declares a partial containment situation. 682 does not react. Dr. Clef proceeds to experiment observation center. 2 minutes later, 682 somehow kills Dr. Blank, the project head, by broken neck caused by blunt force trauma against the control panel despite remaining in the testing area. Notes, this is the official story and we're sticking to it. The alternative that someone tried to murder Dr. Clef by deliberately putting him in the same room as 682 is completely inconceivable. 057. Item, high altitude impact. Tissue test record denied by 05, testing denied by 05. Seriously, I mean seriously? Drop it out of an aircraft and let it fall. Who in the data expunged? One ordinary human child. Child began to scream and cry when 682 was introduced into the cell. The subject was immediately and messily devoured by 682. Okay, so that didn't work so well. Maybe the fact that the kid was crying made 682 perceive it as hostile intent? Guest researcher Dr. W. One ordinary human child drugged to cancel extreme emotional reaction. Child stood and smiled, giggling at 682 with no sign of fear. 682 devoured the subject messily. Maybe we can try that again. I'm sure somewhere out there there's a kid who will make friends with it like 53 did, guest researcher Dr. W. Item, guest researcher Dr. W. Subject screamed in terror and pounded on the door to the testing facility, begging to be let out. 682 devoured it messily 3 minutes after being introduced. Notes, fucking sadistic asshole. I've got no sympathy for that moron whatsoever. Introducing children to this fucking monster. The hell? Assistant Director Clef. Item, blank W blank cutting laser. The tissue sample was successfully bisected 13 times before adopting a mirrored finish. This is a long one. Testing termination test records. After multiple attempts, the main body of 682 was successfully bisected into parts that were equal in mass at T plus 713 hours. 7 hours and 13 minutes. Dead scraps were removed from the room while the two halves, subsequently designated A and B, regenerated. After the recovery period, A and B appeared to survey the area and evaluate each other, presumably in anticipation of attack. Surface fluctuations indicative of internal modification were noted, but all external changes occurred and disappeared far too quickly to be adequately described. High-energy bioluminescent organs on the face, spine, and forelimbs were observed as well on both specimens, usually forming, pulsing, and disappearing again over the course of a few seconds. At T plus 35 hours and 42 minutes, A and B simultaneously collapsed on the floor and all vital signs ceased, remaining in this state for the following 48 hours. At T plus 84 hours, the laser was used again in an attempt to cut A and B into more manageable pieces, leading to minor structural damage to the room as the laser beam reflected off their skin. As both A and B remained immobile despite their increased potential for escape, 2 disposable dudes were released into the room. Immediately upon their entry, data expunged. Technical failure of the observation equipment and test chamber breach was detected from outside, activating safety protocol T98816 OC 108682 and 147. Containment was successfully reestablished at the cost of blank security personnel, blank disposable dudes, and blank researchers, including doctors' data expunged. The majority of the testing area was considered unsalvageable and demolished for later reconstruction. Experiment supervisor Dr. Blank was found unconscious and in critical condition outside the observation chamber. See medical logs for blankety blank 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 blank. Medical staff succeeded in sufficiently reviving him to be debriefed by Agent Blank, whereupon he was harshly reprimanded and data expunged. Note: only one 682 was found in the lockdown area surrounding the wreckage, apparently at near full mass rather than the expected 50%. Scattered tissue within the facility account for the missing mass. Dr. Blank's testimony indicates that A and B exhibited a high degree of coordination following the security breach, but that once B became heavily damaged by security personnel, it was immediately devoured and reabsorbed by A. Total loss of one of the 682 specimens is considered highly improbable, and searches have been called to a halt, Agent Blank. Note, much as our department would love to know whether 682 retained a single consciousness during its dissection, or whether the two counterparts were actually able to cooperate until the stalemate was ended by external forces, for practical purposes, we do not under any circumstances advise trying that again. Dr. Noaquium. A 60 megaton thermonuclear bomb. Testing denied. One would think that putting 682 in the epicenter of an explosion that can cause third-degree burns at a distance of 300 kilometers is a good idea, but as long as there are odds of survival, we simply cannot go through with it. Yes, it's a goddamn nuke, but if 682 survives and adapts, we'd be beyond belief. SCP-914. Data expunged. Data expunged of fine or very fine is no longer to be used by any personnel having contact with 682 at any point. In addition, any objects that have come into contact with 682 at any point are not allowed to be processed by 914. Any attempts to subvert this directive, data expunged. Notes: 682 is too large to fit in the booths in most forms. In addition, the tissue tests have shown that 682 has unpredictable reactions to 914. Finally, 914 is too valuable a research tool and too delicate for this type of test. It was nearly damaged after the incident CN 682 1119857, well, 119, whatever. And data expunged should be repeated. Should the results be recovered, data expunged. Does this really surprise anyone, given what 914 does to normal organics, Dr. G? Item 826. Equipped with one copy of the generally nice, friendly thing that can and will kill 682 permanently if it so much as spots the damn lizard. A 12-page short story written by Dr. Blank detailing a large, friendly monster that is stated to be capable of permanently killing 682, and one disposable dude equipped with one 2010 Ducati Multistrada motorcycle for the purpose of evading 682. Termination record. Story is put between 826 and placed into a large empty room blank by blank meters in dimension, with a remotely operated doorway large enough to send 682 through. He's brought in front of the entryway securely. Once researchers clear the area, the door is remotely open, exposing a green pasture similar to the one described in the story. 682 was reluctant to go through, so Disposable 32 was sent through as bait. He follows through the doorway, whereupon the doorway closes behind them. 30 minutes later, 682 bursts back through the door it was sent through, somewhat worse for wear, killing blank researchers and blank agents in the process. Recovery personnel described the store's pasture as having become a battleground, featuring impact craters with enormous body parts scattered around. Parts thought to be from the story's thing. Recovery story retitled "The Generally Nice Friendly Thing That Tried to Kill 682 Permanently But Failed," and is noticeably thicker, with 209 individual pages that detailed epic battle between the two monsters. Additional attempts to coax 682 into 826 have been met with non-compliance on 682's part. 743. Sample consumed without incident. Mobile container with 743 was transported to testing chamber, into which 682 was released from primary containment. 743's container was opened remotely. 743 observed rusting. 682 appears to ignore it. After blank minutes, 743 starts flowing. 682 appeared to notice within seconds, cautiously approached 743 and tasted its flowing liquid. 682 started to lap up the liquid from 743. After blank seconds, grasped 743 with its forelimbs and started pouring the liquid straight into its mouth. Drank for blank minutes at times blank on it, just ate a sponge on its back. 743 stopped flowing and started feeding. 782 tried to fight off the ant swarm, but was soon covered. Swarm started to feed on 682, who stopped moving. Blank minutes later, after 682 had been reduced to 79% of its original mass, it opened its mouth and stuck out its tongue. The tongue had become 5 meters long and sticky like an anteater's tongue. It started to lap up ants off itself with its tongue, eating thousands of ants at once. 682 and 743 continued to feed off each other for blank hours until testing was terminated. 682 displayed faster than normal regeneration for blank days afterwards. Adapted tongue remained for blank days. Note, 743 treated 682 as organic, but that's hardly conclusive proof. More significant is the question of whether consuming 743's liquid contributed to 682's heightened regenerative abilities. If, as suspected, it did, 743 and 682 need to stay far, far away from each other. Dr. Lambert. SCP-63. Sample eradicated, no traces above molecular level remain. SCP-63 was refitted to the end of a rotary arm, which was deployed into 682's enclosure. Initial approach proves partially successful, with 682 losing more than 20% body weight before regeneration overtakes the destruction process. Newly regrown tissues are not vulnerable to 63's eradication effect. It destroys the deployment arm and 63 digs a hole through the enclosure's ground, where it is later recovered. 682 succeeds in extending a long prehensile limb through the hole and maiming 2 security personnel before containment is re-established. Hypothesis: 682 is not bound to base Earth biological chemistry and can adapt itself to be organic or inorganic as necessary. Some of the boys on the lab are arguing whether we can even classify it as living, at least as we understand life. This worries me, because an unliving, undying, intelligent monster, well, that's where you start getting sacrifices in your name. Dr. Zara. SCP-807. A 682 special, 10 kilograms of rotten meat and sharpened bone splinters, 10 liters of rancid mayonnaise, 1 liter of potassium cyanide, and 1 kilogram of morphine hydrochloride combined into a solid mass then transmuted via 807 was dumped into the testing room. Devoured special that began loudly demanding more. 9 minutes later, collapsed. After 45 minutes of observation, 682 had not moved. 2 disposable dudes in anti-807 environment suits were sent in to verify it was in fact terminated. They were equipped with further specials in case it required further distracting. The specials were placed on the ground in front of his head. In response, opened his eyes and began gnawing weakly on nearest special. Disposable personnel began touching 682, believing it had been rendered harmless. At this point, the skin ruptured in at least 11 locations, releasing ultra-high pressure jets of blood in all directions. Contact with blood breached the integrity of the suits, and both disposable dudes were contaminated. They began data expunged. By the time 682 had finished consuming the second special, its skin had healed over and both disposable dudes had terminated. It then devoured the third special with the same speed and enthusiasm as it had devoured the first. 662. Mr. Deeds is summoned and asks if he can destroy 682 permanently. Response: I'm terribly sorry, sir, I'm afraid I can't. Asked again if he can kill it. Again. Sir, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm afraid I can't. As we get incapacitated. As a matter of fact, depending on how Sir means the word incapacitate, and depending on how long Sir wishes the creature to be incapacitated, yes. Mr. Deeds is asked to expand on how he would perform such an action. Sir, the simplest and quickest method, which I must point out would not be the most efficient, would be for me to offer myself up for the creature to devour me. Certainly, its offensive capabilities would be lessened while it is occupied in consuming my flesh. This will be the simplest, as it requires no preparation on my part, sir. But I'm certain you'll understand that the overall effect on the creature would be insignificant. Were I to engage the creature in combat, either with or without weapons, I could certainly occupy its attention and offensive capabilities for a longer interval. Unfortunately, I'm afraid the creature would eventually defeat me, at which point it would begin consuming my flesh as I have previously described. However, I could certainly booby-trap my person with a variety of noxious substances, soporifics perhaps, or explosives, or perhaps encapsulated neurotoxins, or even redacted, so that when the creature does inevitably consume me, it sustains further damage. That said, sir, I must remind you that the creature's tendency towards regeneration means that any damage I inflict would be sadly temporary. Mr. Deeds is thanked and dismissed. Note, Mr. Deeds' knowledge of redacted is not to be considered a security breach. SCP-738. Researcher sits in 738-2 and asks, what would you want in exchange for permanently destroying the entity which we refer to as 682 while leaving this planet, its biosphere, its human population, its human civilization, the SCP Foundation, and the rest of the universe intact? Entity takes form of the same entity as Test 203, states your Foundation couldn't afford it, and you personally definitely couldn't afford it, and does not respond further. I'm looking forward to finding out what 738 is. We'll know that soon. 272. 682 is released into enclosure amidst a circular array of 30 2,000-watt stadium lights, of which only one is switched on. 272 is dropped onto 682's shadow and embeds itself in the reinforced concrete as expected. 682 quickly discovers it is trapped by its presence in the shadow and starts to attack 272. It stops midway through its attack, examines 272 closely, bellows an incomprehensible string of words, and slowly backs away from 272. All 30 stadium lights are then switched on and off in random stroboscopic disco pattern at 4 that hurts. 682 is forcibly hurled around the enclosure in random directions in accordance with the stroboscopic pattern and sustains heavy damage. After 55 minutes of this process, approximately 95% of its epidermis has been abraded away, its anterior left limb has been severed, 63 of its teeth have been broken out of its jaw, and its skull has been fractured to the point that both its eyeballs have been dislodged from their sockets. At this point, 682's exposed subdermal tissue begins to luminesce. This luminescence rapidly increases until it's brighter than the stadium lights, which eliminate 682's shadow entirely. 682 then collapses and is no longer affected by the stroboscopic pattern. 682 continues luminescing for 48 hours, remaining immobile for the duration. Disposable personnel who recovered 272 from the enclosure were not attacked, but sustained permanent retinal damage from the luminescence despite wearing eye shields. After 48 hours, it resumes normal activity. How did 682 know not to attack 272? Did it recognize the artifact? Was it able to read the glyphs carved into its surface? If it's literate, is it vulnerable to textual mimetic kill agents? Suggested methods for a viability study are welcome. 343. The incident report 682 TFT BS1. I don't know how I feel about the fact that there are 2 separate incident reports for these. Let's see. Tales from the Bright Side. Waiting on God. Oh! Well, this doesn't seem to be very long. And how about this one? We're off to be the lizard. Okay, so. Sidestep for those 2 then. Well, it's already a sidestep, but. How many chapters is this? It's just chapter 1. Oh. Next time on Tales from the Bright Side, we're off to be the lizard. The ads look different now, and it looks like these are just things about Dr. Bright. Let's see now, who's talking? I wish to again formally register my objections to this line of experiment, I said, adhering my comment to the turn back of one Dr. Samet, an up-and-coming new researcher here at the Foundation. I don't know what gender Dr. Bright is, so I don't know what kind of voice I should be using. He seemed to think that the appropriate methods for advancement within our race was to insinuate himself with the overseers. No one likes an ass-kisser. And again, your objections are noted, 963. However, I have the full support of 051 on this matter. 682 is simply too dangerous and we must try all possible outcomes. I bristled when he called me by a number. Why do they always make the same mistake? Mr. Samsit, my name is Dr. Bright. This, and I held out the amulet currently glued to my palm, is SCP-963. Please refrain from mixing the two up, or I will have Grangan there shoot you in the foot. No hard feelings, but I'm sure you understand. A smile crept across my features as I spoke, gesturing to one of the small crew of assistants. Unlike certain other members of the senior staff, I had never actually called the junior staff who had fallen under my wing. Actually named the junior staff who had fallen under my wing, but the other staff had taken to calling them the Lucky Bunch, and it seemed to have stuck. The name seems to reference the fact that researchers under my care tend to live longer, my own obsession with games of chance, and quite possibly a dig at my sometimes simian nature. Amusing, I'm sure. Dr. Samet glanced uncomfortably at my underling before turning his attention back to me. Nevertheless, I cleared my throat, noting from the corner of my eye as Grangan slipped his hand into the inside coat pocket. Bright, we must... Again, I interrupted his speech in an effort to correct the fellow. Dr. Bright, only those who work with me on a regular basis are allowed to drop the title, and you will not be here long enough to work with me on a regular basis. Samet paled visibly at my words. Is that a threat? He questioned, anger in his voice. No, really good odds. You see, this ridiculous undertaking of yours has little to no chance of succeeding. The odds are... I glanced sideways where my primary assistant already had the book out and waiting. English had been working for me long enough to anticipate my needs. A quick glance at the numbers was all I needed to refresh my memory. 512 to 1 against this first plan of yours working. And in fact, the only one who seems to have put any money on this working is... I paused to recheck the numbers. A dead man! Haha, very funny, it doesn't matter. 343 will not... Dr. Bright! I do not need your negative attitude or your predictions of doom. What I need you to do is to go in there and ask your fellow SCP to assist us in this manner. Will you or won't you do your assigned job? The cracks had begun to show in Samet's armor. Not someone who would last long. I had money on him leaving within the week, but for this situation he technically barely outranked me. So I would do it. Of course! I nodded my head, steeled myself, and walked through the door into 343's domicile. Just being in his presence set my teeth on edge. The feelings of calm and contentment attempted to flow into me, but I resisted. It's hard to be gloomy when the world is trying to make you happy, but I've had long years of practice. Especially with him. I think the bit that most disturbs me about 343 is how no matter what I try, no matter how much I tell myself it's a trick, he always looks just like George Burns to me. Cigar in one hand, martini in the other. He says it's to put me at ease, but nothing about this creature puts me at ease. He's too much. Tries too hard. Jack, he says to me, his sad eyes watching as I enter the room. I'm glad to see you back. Are you ready to talk some more? SCP-343, you have been held by the Foundation for several years now, and have yet to prove yourself worth the effort. I ignored his question. Therefore, it has been determined that you be used to attempt the decommissioning of a more dangerous SCP. Do you understand? You know, Jack, I had such high hopes for you. You were created so bright, so gifted. There were plans, still are plans for you to do great things. But you need to get out of here. They're destroying you, Jack. You used to be such a good boy. He had the mannerisms down perfect, even the gruff George Burns voice. I don't know the George Burns voice. The voice, the smoke, even the current look of his room. All designed to make me receptive to him. But I wouldn't have any of it. He was an SCP, a creature, a monster. By God, he would not take me so easily. You may refer to me as Dr. Bright. No one calls me that anymore. Not for decades. Will you assist in this endeavor, or will I have to impose sanctions upon you? I stared into his eyes, refusing to look away. The longer I held eye contact, the smaller his smile became until there was no trace of it left. He took a deep drag on his cigar, almost but not quite frowning. You've become an abomination, Jack. More monster than human, bound to that thing. He gestured at 963, and I could have sworn I felt it tingle. I should remove you from it, return you to your proper thread, make you human again. For a moment my thoughts lifted, hope at the thought that I might be rid of the curse, and I might finally die, but no. I clamped down on my emotions, refusing to break eye contact. He would, or he wouldn't, but I doubted that he could. No, you'll do so much more with it. Very well, Jack, I will help you with whatever this is, if you say please. I could tell he thought I wouldn't, that it was beneath me, but I wouldn't have Samet claiming I undermined his efforts. 343, please assist us. His eyebrows raised a fraction of an inch, but I saw it. I had surprised him. Good. He needed it. He needed to be shook up a little bit. Very well. Later, I stood in the observation booth, watching 343 in the containment room below. He had not asked what he was to do, and gave every indication that whatever it was, he would deal with it. So, I chose not to tell him what he was dealing with. Let God do what he will. Dr. Sammet stood smugly at my side, gloating without saying a word. He believed he'd won the argument, and I felt no need to disabuse him of that notion. This would still be a failure. 343 did not have what it took to take care of 682. Are you prepared, 343? Sammet spoke to the microphone. Below us, 343 gave a thumbs up. Without any further ado, Dr. Sammet pushed a button on the console and the airlock cycled open, releasing 682. The reptile roared into the room, charged straight through the center to throw itself against the door opposite. It had escaped often enough to know the drill and the most likely chance of escape. The most surprising event would be the fact that in doing so, it charged straight through 343 without seeming to touch him at all. 343 for his part continued to stare at the open airlock door expectantly. He glanced from the door up to us and then back at the door before speaking out, "Well, are you going to send this thing out or should I head in?" I smiled to myself watching as 682 continued its assault upon the second airlock. With a smirk of my own, I took the microphone from the slack hands of Dr. Sammet. "Close your mouth, you'll get flies," I advised my fellow researcher before addressing 343. 343, am I correct to understand that you see nothing in the room with you? 343 turned in a circle, eyeing the room before looking up towards me once more. There's nothing in the room with me, Jack. Are you feeling alright? With a grin firmly planted on my face, I turned to Sammet. 682 not neutralized as predicted. 682? 343 called out, a brief flash of anger in his eyes. Between one moment and the next, he was standing in front of me, somehow taller than me without changing his size, glaring down at me. You brought me to 682? I motioned behind his back at English, who quickly began the 682 containment procedures, flooding the room with acid. Sure did, 343. Got a problem with that? Anger from God. With Lucky to off me, and I wouldn't have to go through with the second part of this test. Instead, 343 simply turned his back on me. He's not one of mine, deal with him yourself, and stalked off through the wall. Dr. Sammet, having regained his composure, turned to me with a snarl. Fine, it didn't work, doesn't matter. Get yourself ready, 9063, you're going in. I nodded to Grangan as I turned away to change bodies. The last thing I heard as the door slid shut behind me was the pleasant sound of a handgun going off in close quarters. Next time on Tales from the Bright Side, we're off to be the lizard. Interesting. I feel like this is a whole other set of things I should cover some other time. Especially since this one itself doesn't seem to be particularly, this one doesn't seem to be particularly... I think I probably need to know what 963 is before I come back to that. So... I also think it is entirely possible that this is going to take more than one episode of SCP Sidestep to do. So, in the sake of it being a manageable length, I'm going to stop here. So, this has been Anachi Sasuke. I don't remember which episode of SCP Sidestep this is. I want to say 5? And then the next episode will either do something completely different that has nothing to do with 682, or we'll pick up from where we left off at SCP 702. So, if you liked it, a like and subscribe will be groovy. If you didn't, you don't need to do either one of those things, and I will see y'all in the next one. Later!